Silver just did something the people who trade it for a living did not want you to notice. Not a headline, not a rumor, not another loud prediction on a financial channel. A real move, in the real metal, the kind that does not reverse itself the moment the excitement fades. And almost everything you are going to hear about it over the next few weeks is going to miss the actual reason it happened. If you are holding silver right now, or you have been thinking about it, or you own a few coins in a drawer and you keep wondering whether you did something smart or something foolish, then this is for you. I am not here to sell you a fantasy or promise you a price. I am here to walk you through the one mechanism underneath this move that the big banks and the trading desks understand perfectly well and would rather you never think about. By the time we are done, you will see silver in a way most people watching the news never will. So let me give you the first piece right now before any of the noise. Gold and silver look like cousins and people treat them like cousins, but they live completely different lives. Gold is hoarded. Almost every ounce of gold ever pulled out of the ground still exists somewhere today, sitting in a vault, hanging around a neck, stacked as bars in a central bank. It gets saved. Silver does not get saved. Silver gets used. It gets built into things, spread out in tiny amounts across millions of devices, and then, quietly, it is gone. That single difference is the whole story, and we are going to spend this video pulling it apart. Think about what silver actually is now. It is not just a shiny thing you put in a safe. It is one of the most useful industrial materials on the planet. It conducts electricity better than anything else we have. It sits inside the solar panels going up on roofs and across deserts. It is in the electronics you touch every day, in the switches and contacts and circuit boards, in the cars rolling off the line with more wiring and more sensors than any car in history. Every one of those uses takes a little bit of silver. Not much, a sliver, a trace. And that is exactly the problem. Here is what happens to that sliver. When silver is used in a big, concentrated form the way it is in a coin or a bar, it is easy to melt down and use again. But when it is scattered in tiny quantities across a solar panel or buried in the guts of a phone or a laptop, getting it back is a different matter entirely. You would have to collect the device, break it down, and chemically chase after an amount of silver so small that the cost of recovering it is often more than the silver is worth. So nobody does. The device goes to a landfill or it sits forgotten in a drawer, and that silver is simply retired from the world. Not destroyed, technically, but dispersed so finely that for all practical purposes it is gone forever. Gold is hoarded. Silver is burned. Now hold that idea against the other half of the market. On the supply side, silver mostly is not even mined on purpose. Most of the silver that comes out of the ground each year comes out as a byproduct of digging for copper, for lead, for zinc, for gold. It rides along with those other metals, which means the amount of new silver appearing each year is not really set by how much silver the world wants. It is set by how much copper and zinc the big mining companies feel like producing. When those operations slow down, silver supply slows down with them, no matter how badly the silver itself is needed. So you have demand that quietly consumes the metal forever on one side, and supply that answers to somebody else's decisions on the other. That is a tighter box than most people ever realize they are standing in. And this is the part I really want you to sit with because it is the heart of what just happened. The world has run short of silver. Not for a month, not as a scare, but year after year after year, several years running now, more silver consumed than mined and refined to replace it. The gap gets filled by pulling from stockpiles that already exist, the bars sitting in vaults from earlier, more comfortable times. But a stockpile is a finite thing. Every year you draw it down, there is less of it left. You cannot run a deficit forever against a pile that does not refill itself. At some point the screen and the metal have to meet, and when they do, the price does not move politely. That is why this recent move matters more than the last dozen head fakes. This is not a rumor chasing its own tail. This is the physical reality of a consumed metal beginning to press against a paper market that has spent years pretending the shortage did not matter. And I want you to notice who has been telling you it did not matter. The same desks, the same channels, the same confident voices who make their living on your churn, on you buying when they say buy and selling when they say sell. A calm, informed holder is not a good customer. A frightened one is. So the reason silver moves get buried under noise, and the simplest, truest reason of all, that the metal is being physically used up faster than it is being found, barely gets a mention. Let me pause here, because this is the moment a lot of you feel that familiar knot in your stomach. You have spent a working lifetime building up a retirement account. $100,000, 200 more. And you are watching the world change in ways nobody prepared you for. And you are wondering whether the paper promises you are holding are as solid as you were told. That fear is not foolish. It is your instincts doing their job. And there is something worth knowing about how the largest, most sophisticated players in the world are responding to that exact same fear. Central banks, the institutions that manage the savings of whole nations, have been buying gold at a pace we have not seen in generations, more than 1,000 tons a year, several years running, roughly double what they were buying the decade before. They are not doing it for excitement. They are doing it because metal you hold in your own hand cannot be printed, cannot be defaulted on, and cannot be frozen by somebody on the other side of the world. And here is the part almost nobody tells the ordinary saver. There is a perfectly legal, perfectly established way for you to do the very same thing inside the retirement account you already have. You can move a portion of an existing 401k or IRA into physical gold and silver, real metal, without it counting as cashing out, without triggering the taxes or the penalties you would normally fear. I put together a free guide that walks through exactly how that works, in plain language, no jargon. If you are watching this on your television, just scan the QR code on your screen. If you are on your phone or your computer, go to jeffreedguide.com. This is not some insider trick reserved for the wealthy. If you have $100,000 or more in any retirement account, this is squarely for you. Take a look, then come right back, because the next part is where this really opens up. Now, let me be honest with you about how the paper side of this market works, because it is where the fear gets manufactured. Most of the silver that trades in the world every day is not metal changing hands. It is contracts, promises, claims on silver that vastly outnumber the actual bars available to satisfy them. And for years that arrangement has held, because most people who buy those paper claims never ask for the metal. They settle in cash and move on. It is a game of confidence, and confidence is a wonderful thing right up until the moment somebody wants the real thing and there is not enough of it to go around. And consider the strangest fact of all about silver, one that quietly proves how differently the world treats it compared to gold. Silver has bumped its head against roughly the same ceiling twice in living memory, once around the start of the 1980s and again a bit over a decade ago, the two peaks separated by more than 30 years. Now think about what that means. In nominal terms, it clawed back to the same rough level after a generation. But once you account for what a dollar was worth back at that first peak, silver's real high, its true purchasing power high, has never once been reclaimed, not even close. Every other asset you can name has gone on to new records many times over. Silver, in real terms, is still sitting below a mark it set more than 40 years ago. That is not the profile of something in a bubble. That is the profile of something the world has forgotten to reprice. I think about the kind of person this story is really about. A man who has quietly set aside a little silver for years, not because a guru told him to, but because something in his gut told him that paper promises come and go, and a thing you can hold in your hand does not. His neighbors think he is a little eccentric. His broker gently steers him toward more sensible holdings, and through every loud pullback, every headline calling the end of the metal, he holds because he understood the one thing the noise was designed to make him forget. He was not speculating. He was refusing to be talked out of the truth. The whole machinery of the paper market, the shakeouts and the margin games and the confident voices on the financial channels, exists in large part to separate that man from his metal at the worst possible moment. Everything we are talking about today is really about not being the person who gets shaken out right before the thing he was right about finally becomes obvious. We have watched what happens when paper loses to physical. There was an episode not long ago in another metal market entirely, where the exchange itself simply canceled completed trades, erased them, because the paper price had run so far from the physical reality that honoring the trades would have broken people who were caught on the wrong side. Read that again. The trades were done, finished, and they were undone by decree because the metal did not line up with the paper. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is a matter of record. And it should tell you something plain. When the paper world and the physical world finally disagree hard enough, it is the paper rules that bend, and it is the people holding paper who discover what their promises were really worth. There have also been moments when crowds tried to force this, waves of ordinary people deciding together to buy silver and squeeze the market. And they mostly failed, and it is worth understanding why, because the reason is the same mechanism we have been circling this whole time. When you buy a paper claim on silver, you have not taken any metal off the table. You have just created one more piece of paper. The system can print those all day. The only thing that actually tightens the market, the only thing the desks genuinely cannot manufacture, is physical metal leaving the system and not coming back, which is precisely what industrial demand does, quietly, every single day, with no drama and no headline. It does not squeeze the market in a week. It squeezes it over years, and it never lets go. Let me re-anchor you here, because this is the turn that changes the whole picture. Everything most people argue about with silver is noise on the surface. The daily wiggles, the loud calls, the fear and the euphoria. Underneath all of it is one slow, relentless fact that does not care about any of that. The metal is being consumed, dispersed, retired from the world in trillions of tiny amounts that will never economically come back. And the supply that is meant to replace it depends on mining decisions being made for entirely different reasons. When you strip away everything else, that is what you are looking at. A shrinking thing, quietly getting scarcer, in a world that is starting to notice. And there is a wrinkle here that makes the point even sharper. You might think the whole silver story rests on booming solar demand, on more and more panels needing more and more metal. So watch what happens when even that softens. Manufacturers have gotten cleverer, using thinner and thinner amounts of silver in each panel to save cost. In a recent stretch, the amount of silver going into solar actually fell, the biggest single pullback of its kind. And yet the market stayed in deficit anyway. Sit with that. Even with one of its biggest customers using less, the world still could not produce enough silver to meet demand. That is how tight the underlying box is. When your demand can drop and you are still short, you are not looking at a fad. You are looking at a structural squeeze. Meanwhile, the physical metal has been quietly leaving the places you would expect it to sit. The registered inventories on the exchanges, the metal actually available to be delivered against those paper claims, are dramatically lower than they were a few years ago. A fraction of the peaks. The big vaults in London hold less than they did at their high. And in the East, the appetite for real silver has been so strong that the physical metal there has at times commanded a noticeable premium over the Western price, with the outward flow of metal deliberately restricted. When the same ounce is worth more in one part of the world than another, and the metal is not free to flow to close that gap, you are watching a market where the physical reality is straining against the paper machinery that is supposed to keep everything smooth. It does not stay smooth forever. Now I want to be very straight with you, the kind of straight the loud channels never are. None of this is a promise. Silver is volatile, painfully so. It can drop 30% in a matter of days for reasons that have nothing to do with the metal itself, on nothing more than a change in the rules about how much you must post to hold a position. We have seen it happen. A sharp, brutal fall while nothing about the actual supply and demand of silver changed one bit. So if you decide silver belongs in your picture, you have to hold it in a way that a shakeout cannot break you. Own the real metal, not somebody's paper promise to give it to you later. Size it so that a scary drop can never force you to sell at the worst possible moment. And whatever you do, do not sell into the panic, because selling into the shakeout is exactly what the desks are counting on. This is a case, a strong one, but it is a case, not a guarantee, and it is not personal financial advice. I do not know your situation, you do. And here is the piece I have been building toward this whole time. The part that actually matters for you deciding what to do. Where do you think we are in this story? Because we are not at the moment when everyone knows. We are nowhere near it. Right now, the smart money and the central banks are quietly accumulating the physical metal, positioning for exactly the mechanism we have talked through. But the mainstream, the pension funds, the financial media, the neighbor who asks you what he should do with his money, they have not caught on. Silver is not the thing everyone at the dinner table is bragging about. There is no line around the block at the coin shop. There is no mania. And that absence, that silence, is not a reason to doubt. It is the whole opportunity. Because understand how this always ends. By the time the shortage becomes so obvious that it leads every news segment, by the time every advisor is finally recommending it, and your neighbor is finally asking how to buy it, the easy part of the move will already be behind us. That is how it works, every single time. The metal reprices while nobody is paying attention, and the crowd arrives late, after the quiet accumulation is done. Nobody is going to call you and tell you the window is open. Nobody sends an invitation. There is no announcement. The people who understand a thing before the crowd does are the ones who simply took the time to understand it and then acted while it was still calm enough to act. That calm is not a sign there is nothing here. The calm is the opportunity. So let me answer the question the title put to you, plainly, the way I would tell a friend across my own kitchen table. Silver did not just explode because a trader got excited or a headline crossed a wire. It moved because the truth underneath it has been building for years, out of sight. It moved because a metal that is quietly consumed and never returned has been drawn down against a supply that answers to somebody else's mine plans, and the gap between them finally started to show. Gold is hoarded, silver is burned. That is the real reason, and it is the reason the loud voices will talk around instead of talking about. If you have watched this far, you already understand it better than most of the people who will explain it to you on the news. And if you want to take the next honest step, I want to offer you something real. For those of you with $100,000 or more in a retirement account who watched all the way to the end here, I am opening up a free one-on-one educational web conference. No cost, no obligation, just a genuine conversation about your situation and how physical metal might fit into it. Mention that you watched this full video. If you are on your television, scan the QR code on your screen. If you are on your phone or your computer, go to jeffreedguide.com. The reason to do it now is not fear, and it is not some fake deadline. It is that the best time to make a calm, clear-headed decision is precisely when nothing feels urgent, when you still have the room to think. That window is open right now. It does not stay open forever. Take the quiet moment while you still have it.